Jasmine Carter was about to embarrass herself in front of the most dangerous man in Seoul. She didn't know that yet. All she knew was this. It was 8:47 a.m. She had a merger to close in 13 minutes, and somewhere between Gangnam Station and this street corner, her whole face had decided to fall apart. Lipstick smeared, edges gone. The one morning she needed to walk into that boardroom looking like she owned it. She looked like Tehran Rowe had chewed her up and spat her back out. No mirror, no time, no options. That's when she spotted it. A jet black Genesis G90 sitting at the curb outside the Lotte World Tower, like it had been parked there by someone who had never once worried about a parking ticket in their life. Those tinted windows were polished to a mirror finish, catching the pale morning light off the Han River like glass in a gallery. Jasmine glanced left, glanced right. The sidewalk was moving fast. Office workers, delivery bikes, nobody paying her any attention. She stepped up to the passenger window, leaned in close, breathed on the glass just enough to fog it up. Then she went to work. Lipstick, edges, a quick press of fingers along her hairline. Full emergency touch-up. Right there on Yamsil Dairo, using a complete stranger's car like it was her personal vanity mirror. She stepped back, checked herself one last time. Done. Perfect. Crisis handled. Then the window rolled down, slowly, silently, like someone pulling back a curtain right before the lights come up. The man behind the glass didn't look surprised. He didn't look offended either. He looked like someone who had been waiting, not for her specifically, but for something interesting to finally happen. He was Korean, mid-30s, with a jaw that could cut a contract in half. Navy suit, no tie. Top button open like formality was a choice he'd made, and then unmade this morning. His watch caught the light. Understated, expensive, the kind of watch that never needed to announce itself. He looked at Jasmine the way a person looks at a puzzle they weren't expecting to find interesting. "Are you finished?" he asked. No heat in it, just the question. Jasmine didn't flinch. She capped her lipstick, dropped it into her bag, smoothed the front of her blazer once, and looked him dead in the eye. "You're welcome for the free show," she said. "Now move your car. You're blocking the crosswalk." Something shifted at the corner of his mouth. Not quite a smile. More like a recalibration. The micro-expression of a man who had just updated an assumption. She walked away without looking back. Inside the Genesis, Min-jae watched her go. Natural hair pinned sharp, blazer structured, stride like she had somewhere to be and had already decided she would get there. He picked up his phone and typed a single message to his second-in-command. "Find out who she is." Jasmine made it to the Lotte World Tower with 4 minutes to spare. She straightened her blazer in the elevator mirror, checked her teeth, and reminded herself she had built this deal. She had run the numbers, structured the terms, and personally convinced 2 reluctant board members to stay at the table. This room was hers before she walked into it. The boardroom was already full. Lawyers, senior partners, junior analysts, sitting very straight and trying to look like they belonged. At the head of the table sat Richard Yoon, the senior partner who had handed Jasmine this account 6 months ago with the words, "Don't make me regret this." She hadn't. She set her binder down, pulled out her chair, and scanned the room the way she always did. Exits, water, faces. Standard. That's when she saw him. Same suit, same stillness, same watch on his left wrist. Min-jae Park was sitting in the far corner of the boardroom, one ankle resting on his knee, watching the door. When Jasmine walked in, his eyes moved to her face and stayed there with an expression that gave away absolutely nothing. She kept walking. Sat down, opened her binder. "Mr. Park," Richard said, gesturing across the table, "represents Park Capital Group. They're acquiring a 40% stake in the Meridian Holdings portfolio." Min-jae said nothing, just nodded once, like the introduction was a formality he was tolerating. Jasmine clicked her pen. "Then let's not waste his time," she said. "Or mine." She presented for 42 minutes. No filler, no softening language. Clean data, sharp projections, and 3 separate models that addressed every risk the opposing counsel had tried to raise in the preliminary meetings. At one point, one of Min-jae's own analysts interrupted to push back on her third-quarter forecast. Jasmine paused, looked at him. Page 31, she said. The shipping bottleneck data is sourced directly from the Korea Customs Service quarterly report, cross-referenced with the Busan Port Authority numbers from August. The consensus model your team used didn't account for that. I did. The analyst opened his mouth, closed it. Min Jae across the table said nothing, but his pen stopped moving. After the meeting, as the room emptied and lawyers gathered their papers, Min Jae fell into step beside her in the corridor without announcing himself. You knew the Park Capital Q3 discrepancy, he said. I know every number in every portfolio I touch, she said, not slowing down. That correction cost my analyst significant embarrassment. That correction saved your firm significant money. She glanced at him sideways. You should thank me. He looked at her for a moment. 가능하면, he said, if that's possible. She pushed through the stairwell door without responding. He watched it close behind her and stood there in the corridor for a moment longer than necessary. If Jasmine just humiliated a Park Capital analyst with page 31 data and didn't even blink. Comment, she ate, and subscribe, because this channel was built for people who do their homework. The invitation came by courier 3 days later. Not email, not a text. A physical card, cream stock, embossed in a clean serif font, delivered to her office at Lotta Tower by a man in a suit who asked for her by name and left without waiting for a response. Dinner, Thursday, Mingle's Grill, Gangnam, 8 p.m. No signature. She didn't need one. Jasmine set the card on her desk and looked at it for a long moment, and then she turned it over, wrote 4 words on the back in her own handwriting. Send me the terms first, and had her assistant return it by end of day. The terms arrived within the hour. A private consulting arrangement, structured as a retainer. The number was generous enough to be a statement, not just an offer. She showed up at 8. Mingle's was dark and precise in the way that expensive restaurants are, each course arriving like a deliberate sentence. Min Jae was already seated when she arrived. He stood when she approached the table, which she hadn't expected, and she filed it away without comment. He ordered without looking at the menu. Your Q4 projections on the Meridian deal were 6% more conservative than the market consensus, he said as the first course arrived. The market consensus was wrong, she said. They didn't account for the third quarter logistics disruption. I did. How far out do you model? 18 months is standard. 36 when I don't trust the macro environment. She looked at him. Do you always interview your consultants over dinner? I don't usually hire consultants, he said. Then what am I doing here? He refilled her glass, she hadn't asked him to, and said, I haven't decided yet. It should have been dismissive. Somehow, it wasn't. The evening moved like a negotiation dressed up as a meal. She dismantled the offshore fund structure in his Singapore holdings over the second course. She identified a currency exposure in his Tokyo position by the time dessert arrived. He didn't argue any of it. He listened. The particular quality of listening that belongs to people who are used to being the most prepared person in the room and have just realized they're not. You're not afraid of me, he said somewhere near the end of the evening. Jasmine considered that. Should I be? Most people are. Most people don't do their homework. He looked at her for a long, quiet moment. Outside, Gangnam moved past the window. Lights, traffic, the city doing what cities do. On the way out, she reached into her bag and handed him a single folded page. What's this? He asked. Your business model. Corrected. She buttoned her coat. You're welcome. She stepped out into the night air. Her driver pulled forward. She got in without looking back. Min Jae stood on the pavement holding the folded page and felt for the first time in a long time that the evening had not gone the way he had planned it, and found that he didn't mind. It happened on a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks later. Jasmine was on a call with a client in Tokyo, standing at her office window, watching the Han River catch the light, when she heard it. A sharp crack, a rush of cold air, and the sound of glass spreading across the floor behind her. She turned slowly. A brick sat in the middle of her office, glass in a wide circle around it. Her assistant was already in the doorway, hand over her mouth. Call building security, Jasmine said, her voice flat. Then step out and close the door. The brick had paper wrapped around it, held with a rubber band. She pulled on a latex glove from her desk drawer. She kept them for document handling and unfolded the note. 2 lines. Korean. Her Korean wasn't perfect, but it was enough. She read it twice, set it down on her desk with the same composure she brought to quarterly reviews. Then she picked up her phone and dialed a number she had memorized in hopes she wouldn't need. Min-jae picked up on the first ring. "There's a brick in my office," she said. "The note is in Korean. I assume it wasn't meant for me." A pause, short, sharp. "Don't touch it again. I'm sending someone." "You're sending no one to my office," she said. "You're going to tell me exactly what that note says, who sent it, and why. Then we're going to have a very direct conversation about what I've apparently walked into." Silence on the other end. Longer this time. "Fine," he said. Jasmine just found a brick through her office window, and her first move was to put on a latex glove and call the man responsible. Subscribe, because the audacity alone deserves your support. The note was from the SEO syndicate, Seoul-based, Chicago-connected, and furious about Min-jae's push into the Meridian deal, which had quietly cut across territory they considered theirs. By associating with Jasmine publicly, dinner, the boardroom, the retainer, Min-jae had drawn a direct line from his world to hers. He explained this in precise, factual language, seated across from her in her office 2 hours later. Surrounded by the residue of the broken window, her facilities team was still sweeping up. "I'll handle it," he said. "I know you will," she said, "because if the SEO group sends anything else in my direction, I will make sure your entire acquisition history in South Korea becomes the subject of a very public financial audit. I have enough documentation to make that audit very interesting." He looked at her. "You're threatening me." "I'm negotiating," she said. "There's a difference. Handle it, Min-jae." He left. She waited until the office door closed behind him. Then she sat down in her chair, looked at the taped-up window, and let out a slow breath. She was not afraid, but she was paying attention now in a way she hadn't been before. And Jasmine Carter, when she started paying attention, was the most dangerous thing in any room. 2 days later, 2 black SUVs appeared outside her building. Men in suits who didn't work for her security firm and weren't trying to look like they did. Jasmine called Min-jae at 7 a.m. "Remove them," she said. "They're there for your protection." "I didn't ask for protection." "Jasmine." "Min-jae." Her voice didn't rise. It went quieter, which was the version that meant she was done repeating herself. "I've had my own security since I closed my first independent deal at 27. I don't need yours. What I need is for you to understand the difference between protecting someone and managing them." A pause. "Remove them by 8, she said. "Or I terminate the retainer, return the consulting fee, and you can find someone else who'll let you treat them like an asset." She ended the call. At 7:49, both SUVs were gone. At 8:15, a message came through. One word. "Patuneo. Patuneo. Jasmine redo is. Ses heopon pesa down on heodesku. Ende orodu hoselpu. Egjakutlitu sekonju obu something dead. Wajanat kuid eru, smile bot waja closure inapu." Danet got back to work. He sent bodyguards. She sent them home before 8 a.m. If Jasmine just became your personal role model, hit subscribe. And if you've ever had to remind someone that protection and control are not the same thing, drop A in the comments. It was Jasmine's idea to take him there, not to impress him. She had stopped needing to impress people somewhere around her second independent deal. This was something else. The kind of test you only give someone when you've started, against your better judgment, to take them seriously. She told him to dress down. He showed up in a gray crew neck and dark trousers and still looked like he'd walked out of a campaign shoot, but she let that go. They drove south on a Saturday morning, Jasmine at the wheel of her G-Wagon, no security, no entourage. Min-jae rode in the passenger seat with his elbow on the door and his eyes on the city changing outside the window. Seoul's Gangnam gave way to older streets, lower buildings, neighborhoods that hadn't been swallowed by glass towers yet. He didn't ask questions. He watched. She pulled up outside a community center, on a street that had character the way only older streets do. Not polished, but real. A hand-painted mural ran the length of the outer wall. Afro-Korean faces, every age, rendered in deep golds and blues and terracotta. At the bottom, in both Hangul and English, "We were always here." Minjae looked at it for a moment before getting out of the car. Inside, 40 kids sat at laptops in rows, the focused kind of quiet that only happens when people are genuinely absorbed in something. A woman in her 60s, gold earrings, reading glasses on a beaded chain, the posture of someone who had never once entertained being disrespected, looked up from a whiteboard when the door opened. Her name was Ms. Amma. She had been running this program for 11 years. She had also known Jasmine since Jasmine was 12 years old and had walked into the same building with a broken laptop and a refusal to say it was broken. "You're 2 weeks late for the budget review," Ms. Amma said, pointing at Jasmine without breaking eye contact. "I know," Jasmine said. "I'm sorry." "Sorry doesn't reorder the printer cartridges." "I'll sort the printer cartridges." Miss Amma looked at Minjae the way she looked at everything, directly without apology. "Who's this?" "Someone who might want to invest," Jasmine said. "Might," Minjae said. Ms. Amma looked at him for exactly 3 seconds. "The coffee is in the back. Make yourself useful while I steal her for 20 minutes. Minjae, a man who ran operations across 4 cities and had not been spoken to like that since he was a teenager, went and found the coffee. He was standing near the back wall, reading the alumni board, photographs, names, university crests, company logos, when a girl approached him. Maybe 10 years old, natural hair in 2 puffs, a tablet tucked under her arm, and the expression of someone who had already decided this conversation was going to be productive. "Do you work in finance?" and she asked. "I do," he said. "Then you should look at this." She held out the tablet. On the screen was a data dashboard, clean, color-coded, clearly built by someone who understood both design and function. It tracks food waste across 3 school cafeterias in real time. "I'm presenting it to the District Education Board next Thursday." Minjae looked at the dashboard, then at her. "How long did this take you to build?" 6 weeks. The Korean data labeling took longest because I had to write a custom parser." She said it the way you say something that was difficult but not impossible. "Ms. Amma says if the district adopts it, we can license the model to other boroughs." "Ms. Amma is right," Minjae said. The girl nodded, satisfied, and walked back to her laptop. Minjae stood there for a moment. He looked at the alumni board again, looked at the room, looked at the mural through the window. When Jasmine came back, she found him still standing there, coffee untouched and cooling in his hand. She didn't say anything. She just watched his face. "How long have you been funding this?" he asked. 4 years. Quietly." "Why quietly?" "Because the moment you make it about yourself, it stops being about them." He turned to look at her. Something in his expression had shifted. Not softened exactly, but opened. Like a window. Like a fogged glass rolling down. He walked over to Miss Amma, set down his card on the desk next to her. "Tell me what the next 3 years of this program costs," he said. "All of it. Staff, equipment, the printer cartridges." Ms. Amma picked up the card, read it, looked at him over her glasses. "I'll send you an invoice," she said. "We don't do pledges here. We do receipts." "Then send me a receipt," he said. On the drive back, neither of them spoke for a long time. The city moved past the windows. Jasmine kept both hands on the wheel. "You didn't have to do that," she said eventually. "No," he said. "I know." She nodded once, eyes on the road. But something had shifted between them, quiet and irreversible. The way things shift when someone shows you who they actually are, and it turns out to be different from who you expected. Minjae just walked into Jasmine's world and funded a child's vision before he even finished his coffee. If this story is doing something to your chest, subscribe and let us know in the comments what hit you hardest. 3 weeks passed. The Meridian deal moved forward. Jasmine ran her meetings and filed her reports and maintained the clean, professional distance she had always maintained. Minjae sent documents when required and nothing else. The one-word message, "Patuneo," sat in her phone, and she did not reply to it, and she did not delete it either. It was a Wednesday night, late, when everything changed. She was working through a wire transfer summary Minjae had shared as part of the due diligence package. Routine, dense, the kind of document that required a second coffee and no distractions. Page 37. Page 38, page 41. She stopped. A number, small, buried in an attachment referencing a subsidiary holding account. $847,000, routed through a shell company registered in the Cayman Islands, under a name that meant nothing on its own. Except Jasmine had heard that name before. 6 months ago, a passing comment over lunch. Her mentor, Richard Yoon, the man who had handed her this account, who had championed her career for a decade, who had been in that boardroom on the first day she met Min Jae, had mentioned a holding account in passing while talking about a client he'd referred to only as the Seoul connection. She had not thought about it again until right now. She pulled up 3 more files, ran 2 cross-references. The pattern that assembled itself was clean and cold and completely unmistakable. Richard Yoon had been feeding information to the Seoul syndicate, the same syndicate that had thrown a brick through her window. He hadn't championed her career out of mentorship. He had positioned her specifically and deliberately to gain proximity to Min Jae's financial operations. The retainer, the boardroom introduction, the access to the Meridian portfolio. All of it had been a key in a lock she had never known existed. She had been used. Jasmine sat with that for a long time. The office was silent. The Han River was a dark ribbon through the window. She thought about every conversation with Richard over the past year. Every piece of advice, every introduction, every moment she had mistaken strategy for care. She felt something move through her that she didn't have a clean name for. Not quite anger, not quite grief. Something in between, the specific pain of realizing that someone you trusted had been building something with you that you were never actually a part of. She let herself feel it for exactly 5 minutes. Then she opened a new folder on her desktop and started building a file. Take a breath with me here, because Jasmine just found out the man who built her career was using her as a key to someone else's kingdom. If this hits you like it hit me, drop A in the comments. She didn't cry. She started a file. Subscribe. That's the only response this story deserves. She didn't call Min Jae. Not yet. She needed the file to be complete before she handed it to anyone. That was the rule she'd made for herself 10 years ago, and it had never failed her. You don't present a case until it's airtight. You don't show your hand until you know every card on the table. It took her 9 days. During those 9 days, she attended 3 meetings with Richard Yoon and smiled at the right moments and gave nothing away. She was exceptionally good at this. She had been trained by the best after all. She was almost done when Min Jae called. "The Millennium Foundation Gala," he said without preamble. "Friday, I need you there." "In what capacity?" "Consultant." She paused. "What's the actual function?" A beat. "Territory handover. 3 allied groups. It's dressed as a charity dinner. And you're telling me this because you'll be in the room and you should know what you're walking into." She appreciated that, more than she expected to. "Send me the venue details," she said, "and the floor plan if you have it." He sent both within the hour. She studied them for the rest of the evening. The Intercontinental's 42nd floor had been rented out entirely. By 8 o'clock, it was full of exactly the kind of people who understood that the most dangerous conversations happen in the most beautiful rooms. Jasmine wore black. She always wore black to things like this. The dress had structure, sharp shoulders, floor length, the kind of silhouette that said, "I am here to see everything." She wore 1 ring, no other jewelry. She had the building's schematics memorized before she arrived. She knew where the service corridors connected to the main hall. She knew which windows on the south face overlooked the adjacent tower. She knew the 3 positions that offered a clean sight line into the event space from outside. The 4th floor of the tower across the street, the rooftop access point 2 buildings east, and the upper residential floors directly north. She had flagged all 3 in her notes that morning, almost as an exercise. Almost. By 9:30, she was circulating, champagne glass in hand, conversation light and purposeful, the particular social fluency of someone who has spent years in rooms where nothing is what it appears to be. Min Jae moved separately, surrounded at intervals by men in suits who were not event staff. They did not make eye contact across the room. They didn't need to. It was the reflection that caught her. She was standing near the south-facing window, half listening to a conversation about real estate when the light changed across the street. Third floor of the adjacent tower. Upper window, east side. A shape that was wrong. Too still, too deliberate, at an angle that had no casual explanation. Her champagne glass didn't move. She finished the sentence she was in the middle of, excused herself with a smile, and crossed the room to Min Jae's side with the measured pace of someone who was simply moving between conversations. She stopped next to him, picked up a canapé from a passing tray, spoke without turning her head. Third floor, east tower, upper window. Don't look. His body didn't move. Not 1 degree. You're certain? I don't flag things I'm not certain about. A pause, 2 seconds. Options? I need the AV room. Where is it? Service corridor, north end, second door on the left. She set down her champagne glass on a side table, smiled at no one in particular, and walked toward the north corridor like she was looking for the bathroom. The AV room was unlocked. The camera array for the stage was a standard corporate event setup. 4 units, remotely operated from a single panel. She found the panel in under a minute. The east-facing camera was Unit 3. She pulled it off the stage feed, angled it manually toward the south window bank, and looked for the flash override. Found it. She triggered it on manual, a full burst sequence, the kind used for photo opportunities on stage. The light that hit the adjacent tower's upper floor was sharp and sudden and white. Through the camera feed, she watched the figure at the window drop back instinctively, one hand coming up. The line of sight was broken. She reset the camera to its original position, left the AV room, and walked back into the main hall. Min Jae was still standing where she left him. She picked up a fresh champagne glass from a passing tray and stepped back into the nearest conversation like she had never left it. 30 seconds later, Min Jae was at her elbow. Camera flash, she said quietly before he could speak, blinded the sightline. You have maybe 3 minutes before they reposition. I'd start your goodbyes. He looked at her. Something moved in his face that she had not seen there before. He was already moving by the time she finished the sentence. Jasmine just stopped an assassination attempt using a camera flash and a floor plan she memorized that morning. And she did it without spilling her champagne. Subscribe. This channel is not for the faint-hearted. She found him on the 19th floor. She had followed the route she knew. Service stairs north side, the corridor that connected the tower's utility access to the main building. She'd heard the sounds 2 floors above the gala and moved toward them the way people who are not afraid of difficult things move toward difficult things. Directly. The corridor was dim, one fluorescent strip. Min Jae was standing against the far wall, sleeves pushed back, jacket somewhere on the floor. His hands were at his sides. His face was completely composed in the way that only people who have learned to separate what they feel from what they show are composed. Which is to say, it was not calm. It was controlled. There is a difference. The man who had been at that window was no longer a problem. Jasmine stood in the corridor entrance and took in the scene. She didn't step back, didn't make a sound. She looked at Min Jae the way you look at someone when you are deciding whether to treat them as a stranger or as something else. She had already made that decision before she walked down the stairs. She opened her bag, reached past her phone and her notebook and the emergency kit she carried since her first board seat, and pulled out a small packet of wet wipes. She crossed the corridor and held them out. He looked at them, then at her. Clean your hands, she said. He took the packet. She watched the wall behind him while he did. When he was done, she reached up and straightened his left cufflink, which had twisted at an angle that would have bothered her, even if nothing else about this moment was bothering her. The mole in your operation, she said. Her voice was even. It's Richard Yoon. He went very still. He's been feeding the SCO syndicate your acquisition timeline for at least 8 months, she continued. He used my access to your financial documents to pull the data. He positioned me inside the Meridian deal specifically for that purpose. Min Jae looked at her. You have proof. I have a complete file. Transfers, communication logs, 3 separate shell company trails that all route back to a holding account he mentioned to me once over lunch 6 months ago, thinking I wouldn't connect it. She paused. He underestimated me. People do until they don't. The corridor hummed with the distant music from 42 floors above them. Why are you giving this to me? He asked, and the way he asked it, not suspicious, but careful, like someone handling something they didn't want to break. Told her he understood what it cost her. "Because I don't let people use me twice," she said, "and because I meant what I said when I agreed to be your partner." Patuneo works both ways. She reached into her bag and set a folded USB drive on the window ledge beside him. "Everything is on there," she said, "encrypted. The key is your mother's name. I found it in a company bio from 2019. Change it after you open it." He picked up the drive, turned it over in his fingers. Jasmine. It was the first time he had said her name like that. Not as a professional address, not clipped at the end of a sentence, but as a complete thought on its own. She looked at him. He didn't say anything else. He didn't need to. There are moments where what passes between two people exists entirely outside language, and this was one of them. "Come on," she said. "We should go back up." "You go up. I need 5 minutes." She nodded, picked up her bag, got 3 steps down the corridor. "The cufflink," he said behind her. She turned. "Thank you," he said. She held his gaze for one moment, then she turned back toward the stairs and kept walking. She straightened his cufflink in a service corridor after the worst moment of the night and handed him the file that could end his enemy. If you felt that, you already know what to do. Subscribe. Leave a comment. This community shows up. Richard Yoon resigned from the firm 11 days later. No statement. No explanation offered to the partners. His accounts were flagged across 3 regulatory bodies simultaneously on a Thursday morning. A coordination that, if anyone had been looking for it, bore the quiet hallmarks of someone who knew exactly which thread to pull to make the whole thing unravel. Nobody looked too hard. Jasmine received a call from her lawyer at 9 a.m. and said thank you, and moved to her next meeting. The Meridian deal closed at $2.4 billion 3 weeks after that. Clean numbers, clear structure. The partners called it the most efficient acquisition they'd handled in 5 years. Jasmine received a single congratulations message from Min Jae at 6 p.m. on the day of closing. Jalheso. Well done. She read it on the elevator down to the building's car park, allowed herself exactly 2 seconds of something that felt, quietly and without drama, like satisfaction. Then she stepped outside. He was parked at the curb, same Genesis G90. Engine running. She hadn't told him she'd be leaving at 6. She hadn't told anyone. She stopped on the pavement and looked at the car. Then she looked at him through the windshield. He got out, didn't say anything. Walked around to the passenger side and opened the door. Stepped back. Jasmine looked at the open door, looked at him. "You're driving," he said. She looked at him for a long moment. This man who ran operations across 4 cities and had not let anyone close enough to matter in longer than he probably cared to admit. This man who had sat in her passenger seat on a Saturday morning and funded a 10-year-old's vision before finishing his coffee. This man who had stood in a dim corridor on the 19th floor and said her name like it meant something. She took the keys, got in, adjusted the seat and the mirrors with the ease of someone who has always known how to take the wheel. He settled into the passenger seat, jacket on, no tie, window cracked an inch. The way she'd noticed, he liked it. She pulled out into evening traffic and merged onto the road that ran along the Han River. Lights on the water, the city doing what it does, moving forward without apology. Neither of them spoke for a while. "Where are we going?" she asked eventually. He looked out the window. "I don't know yet." She considered that. "Good answer." They drove. The river ran beside them, dark and constant. Seoul spread out in every direction. Towers and old streets, and the mural on a community center wall that said we were always here in 2 languages because one was never going to be enough. No ring, no promise, no clean ending with a bow on it. Just 2 people who had looked at each other through every kind of pressure and decided without ceremony that this was the only partnership worth having. Jasmine kept her eyes on the road. Min Jae kept his eyes on her. The city lights moved across the hood of the Genesis like a reflection. This time she was the mirror. They didn't ride off into the sunset. They drove into the unknown with her at the wheel, and that is so much better. If this story stayed with you, subscribe and drop your favorite moment in the comments. This channel was built for people who believe the best stories don't end. They evolve. When I started writing this story, I had one image. A woman using a stranger's car window as a mirror. That was it. I built everything around that one moment of audacity. I didn't want a rescue story. I've read too many of those, so I flipped it. Jasmine is wealthier. Jasmine is the strategist. When Minjai sends bodyguards, she fires them before 8 a.m. without raising her voice. The chemistry works because neither of them is trying. What attracts him isn't how she looks. It's that she corrects his analyst with a page number and walks away. Respect is more interesting than romance. The scene I found most torturous to write was the corridor on the 19th floor. Everything had gone wrong, and Jasmine's response was wet wipes and a straightened cufflink. No speech, just, I'm still here. That kind of loyalty is the hardest thing to write without overselling it. The Richard Yoon betrayal cost me the most emotionally, because Jasmine doesn't collapse. She builds a file. That felt true. When people fail us, the most powerful response isn't rage, it's receipts. I've made mistakes that led me somewhere better than where I was aiming. I think most of us have. That's the real story here. Not the merger, not the mafia, just two people who ended up exactly where they needed to be because of a fogged-up window on a street in Seoul. Sometimes the wrong door opens the right room, and if you want to see more of my stories that I make with so much care, click on the video that appears now on your screen.